Welcome to Rooting for You, a seasonal gardening podcast for non-experts. I'm Tess, and I know nothing.
And I'm Alyce, and I know some things.
Each week we'll chat about one gardening topic and then discuss the effort-reward payoff by asking, is the juice worth the squeeze? Just a heads up, there might be a bit of swearing in this episode. You've been warned. We've had a few requests for an episode on raspberries, and now the time has finally arrived. When I think of raspberries, I'm thinking of summer, and in particular, the berry fruit salad my mum always makes for Christmas Day. But we're sitting here on a freezing day in what feels like the depths of winter, and Alyce is going to tell us everything that we need to know about how to plant raspberries. We flagged in the Intro to Winter episode that now is the time to get them in the ground, and I'm excited. So Alyce, tell us, how do we grow raspberries?
Well, first off, I'd love to let everyone know that it is the first couple of weeks of winter here, and I still have raspberries growing on the canes in my garden. So as much as they're a wonderful summer fruit and there are plenty of them grown in summer, you can actually grow them all the way through into winter, which makes them one of my absolute favourite crops.
Look at us busting myths.
I know. Look at us go. I mean, in the start of winter, there's not a lot of fun fruit being harvested, and the fact that I've still got raspberries is incredible. And I actually think raspberries are the ultimate economic choice in the garden because I find them very cheap to grow, very easy to grow, and paying for them, they're exorbitantly expensive, and that's not even organic. So I've never sprayed my raspberries anything. So my raspberries are organic, and the rate that I'm picking them versus if I was buying organic punnets, huge economic benefits. So if you like raspberries, you buy raspberries, or you wish you could buy raspberries, 100% grow some. And I'm going to get into this a bit later, but you can grow them in a pot, so you don't need a huge amount of space to give the raspberries a crack.
That's amazing news because they, as you say, they are expensive. So let's grow them ourselves.
Bloody oath. Now, first thing, we've talked about a lot of different crops so far on this show, but we've always talked about annual crops. So things like a tomato, you get it in, it goes hard, you rip it out. Raspberries are different. Where we put them now is where they're going to be forever.
Ooh, okay. That's a lot of commitment.
It is a lot of commitment. I don't want you to take it lightly. Pick your spot. They can be quite weedy, which actually makes them incredibly easy to grow because they just take over. But the reason I say this is, like, don't plant them in like your bed that you've also, used to grow your veggies or something like that. Absolutely no. Give them their own garden bed or their own pot or their own space.
Okay.
Because they will take over. And they like a lot of sun. So pick a really sunny spot to plant your raspberries. But having said that, they only need summer sun. So in winter, they're going to lose all their leaves and die down. So you know how we talked about in last season about how like winter sun and summer sun is very different?
Yep.
When it comes to veggies, you want to plant them somewhere you've got good winter sun. With raspberries, don't worry about the winter sun. Just make sure you've got really good summer sun. So do you even, you probably don't even know what a raspberry, what this magical plant even looks like.
I'm picturing like a strawberry bush.
No. Couldn't be further from a strawberry bush. So despite the fact strawberry is a berry and, blackberries, raspberries, all those are also berries, strawberries, I think, frankly, are they're a different species. They're just on another planet. They are little tiny plants, little tiny bushy plants. Raspberries, blackberries, boysenberries, all these grow on these massive thorny canes that look like big wavy arms in the garden.
Yeah, well, now you say that, I can picture like a blackberry bush that's got thorns on it that you need to watch out for. But
yeah, and it's like, the wavy arms might be like 2 meters long or something. It's like imagining like when you're at a used car dealership and they got some
that's what I'm picturing.
Guy flying around in the wind. That's what your raspberry canes look like.
And so I'm sure we're going to get there, but how do we deal with these wavy raspberry arms?
Well, we will get there. But first, what I'd like to explain is the plant will grow the wavy raspberry arm. The cane is the formal term. That will fruit. And once that has produced fruit, it will never fruit again for the rest of eternity.
Okay.
So once that wavy arm has fruited, we cut it off straight at the ground, get rid of it. Then the root system, and this is kind of why it fell into the same category as like the asparagus and the rhubarb, the root system will then send up another cane, another wavy arm, and then that will produce fruit, and then we cut that down.
Okay.
So it continues like that in that process. But what's actually valuable is the root system under the ground, not the plant itself. Because again, once that cane's fruited, it's not going to go again. And it's that reason that kind of makes it weedy, because the roots continue to grow and then these raspberry wavy canes continue to come up all over the shop.
How many raspberry wavy canes are we talking about here? Like,
Well, if you let it go, like 20,
oh, okay.
30, 40... And then the roots will just keep getting bigger and bigger every season, and then you'll get more and more canes every season. Mm-hmm. So I said, like, how easy is that? You just whack the roots in once, and then it just keeps delivering.
That sounds easy, but let's deal with these wavy arms, raspberry arms.
So the time to plant them, in my opinion, is now, midwinter. The reason for that is you can buy them bare-rooted, so they're going to be a lot cheaper than if you buy them at other times of year. And also, anytime you plant a plant that's in its full growing mode, so in the warmer months, it's going to be a little bit more temperamental. But like we spoke about in the intro to winter, in winter, the plant is asleep. It's not doing anything. Therefore, we can be a bit rough with it. We don't have to stress about stressing the plant, actually.
And if you're looking for a longer discussion on what bare-rooted actually means, and you've skipped over the intro to winter episode, just flick back to that one, and that's where we discuss it in more detail.
Exactly. So when you're shopping for your raspberries, there's so much jargon in the raspberry department, and it just drives me mental. It really doesn't need to be this bloody hard. There's two types of raspberries. A lot of people are going to talk about primer canes and floricanes and all this kind of crap. Just ignore that. You've got summer fruiting and you've got autumn fruiting.
Oh, okay.
And there might be, 8 main varieties available of each to the gardener. I'm sure there are a billion others that aren't as readily available. But, by using those names, and the nursery, the online shop will say summer fruiting or autumn fruiting. They are as they sound. The summer fruiting raspberries will give you raspberries in summer as early as Christmas, or as early as December, Christmas if you're in Australia, Northern Hemisphere, we're talking June. The autumn fruiting raspberries will, unsurprisingly, give you fruit in autumn. And it's these ones that are still giving me fruit now in the first couple of weeks of winter.
How brilliant's that, having raspberries in autumn?
I know. So
the joys of growing your own is that you can choose to do that.
Exactly. If you had plenty of room, I would say go a mix of summer and autumn. So you'll have some during summer, and then those ones won't produce anymore, and then you'll have some during autumn. So that way, if you actually pick your varieties carefully, you can have raspberries for like 7 months of the year, which is insane.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Any other fruit, like, my apple tree, I get a shitload of apples, but I get them all in the same, week, month. I love that you can stagger it like that by choosing your varieties. Having said that, if you don't have the space, or you're not quite diving in to get the full spectrum 7-month raspberries, I would choose the autumn fruiting variety for a couple of reasons. One, because I think fruit is thin on the ground come winter or come that end of autumn period, whereas early summer, I've got other exciting things going on. The second thing, the reason why I'd pick the autumn fruiting is they will give you raspberries in a year, whereas summer fruiting raspberries will take 2 years to fruit.
Oh, okay.
So once they're established, this doesn't matter anymore. But if we're looking for a quick win as a gardener, go the autumn fruiting. Now, the reason this comes down to this primocane, floricane crap. And I just don't think it's important for the beginner to understand. So
no, if that's all the difference is that the 1 year or 2 years, then we've got it.
Then we've got it, exactly. If you want raspberries for Christmas in Australia, then go your summer and you can put them in your trifle. If autumn sounds more appealing, go the autumn and you'll have them sooner. Again, just read the different varieties, read which one it says, pick it accordingly. But no matter which one you're growing, you're going to be planting them at the moment. The other thing is raspberries grow so much better in colder climates. So us in the south of Australia, we are prime raspberry territory.
Well, that is a first, isn't it?
Well, it actually is, isn't it? Like, there's so many things we can't grow down here, but we will grow better raspberries than anyone else. So all you people in Queensland, stick to your bananas and your mangoes and all your other fun fruits.
Your fun tropical fruits.
Let us have our raspberries. I am joking. You can actually grow them in the warmer climates, but the cold is a benefit. So
Great.
I will take that win. If you are in Tasmania or if you're in the colder parts of Victoria like I am, you absolutely need a raspberry in the garden. Now, they are heavy feeders. They like a very rich soil. So before we plant this plant, we've got our spot. Before we plant it, we need to build up this soil. I am talking shitloads of shit, shitloads of manure, heaps of compost, and I would probably recommend buying some blood and bone. This is from like a nursery gardening store, that kind of thing.
Okay.
They really love it. Mix that into the soil.
Okay.
Richer, the better.
So that's just, you kind of would just chuck it in the garden bed and like mix it around with a shovel a bit? Is that okay?
A shovel or like a rake or
Okay.
anything. Just mix it all in. Then we're going to have our little bare-rooted raspberries and we're going to plant them just the way we did in episode 1, plant a plant.
Okay.
So get them in and you want them about 50 centimetres apart.
Okay.
So they're not as huge as like, you know, something like a blackberry might be planting 2 metres apart. They're not as massive as that. So 50
I'm
centimetres.
picturing quite a massive plant, so 50 centimetres
No.
seems close. Okay. So it's not the... How big do you reckon it gets?
The plant that you'll be buying as a bare-rooted plant to plant will be like smaller than a beer bottle.
And then once it's
Once
grown
it
and producing fruit?
grows, because it's not a bush, it's not a tree, it's like these
Dangly
wavy
arms.
So the way we manage the dangly arms is we need some kind of trellis around them. We can't just let these dangly arms go all over the shop.
Okay, so that's quite important as well when you're choosing your
is.
spot.
I think you can build a trellis anywhere. What you really need to do is just get 2 massive stakes, nail them into each end of the bed, and just run some twine or some wire in between the 2 stakes. And then as the dangly arms come up, you kind of weave the dangly arms in between this twine or wire that you've got going, just to hold them up off the ground and in position. And then you'll kind of, you know, you'll train it to go up, but then it'll get too long. You know, like if they're growing to like 1.5, 2 meters, then it'll kind of keep going and then it kind of goes down again. So it creates this like wave formation.
Yeah, okay.
The arms go up, they get hooked over the wire, the arms go down.
Okay.
There's a lot of drawings online about like this wavy situation.
Yeah.
Like a sideways S.
So how many strings across would you do if you were building that trellis? Okay, all right, okay.
You can go online.
Ah, I see. So then you just go up and down between the 2.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
get your wave. I
Yeah.
can see it, yep.
There are people online come up with really fancy like DIY like these Y trellises that kind of like a Y or a V shape. They look great. I do not have like the handyman in me to build one of these. So I literally just have 2 posts and 2 bits of string between. And that does me fine. If you're super onto this stuff, then Google some images of it and you'll see what I mean and you can get a good one. But frankly, 2-star pickets, a bit of string and Bob's your uncle. Because we do want to get them off the ground. Otherwise, it's going to be a hot mess in your garden. And also, you don't want the fruit sitting on the ground. You want the fruit up. So we've got our rich bed. We've planted our plant 50 centimetres apart. We want to water them in, but then for the rest of winter, we don't actually need to do much because they're not doing much.
Okay.
Come spring, we obviously want to load up on the water and keep the soil moist throughout the warm months, throughout the fruiting months. Because again, if we don't have a lot of water, we're not going to get a fat, juicy raspberry. So that's important. As I said, you can grow it in pots. Brilliant. My only hesitation, for want of a better word, of growing in pots is it's just harder to maintain the water to a pot, as discussed. So if you're going to grow in pots, fine, but you need to be on that watering.
Okay.
Because if you're not and that plant dries out and it is going to be quite a big plant, you just aren't going to get fat, juicy raspberries. So as it grows, you'll tie it up. You can be a bit loose with it. You can even like just put stakes in the ground and get twine and like bunch them together and tie them to a stake. If you had a pot, because if you had a pot, you're not going to have like a trellis going long ways. So one stake in the pot, loosely tie them to that, and then they can kind of go up, tie to the stake, and then flow down again. That's totally fine also. When you get fruit from your raspberries will of course depend on what variety you planted. So don't be looking for fruit in early summer if you've planted an autumn fruiting variety.
Yeah, sure. And also remembering that if you're doing the summer one, you've got to wait 2 years.
Exactly. When a raspberry is ready to harvest, it'll feel like you'll go to pull it off and it will just easily come off. Like you'll touch it and it will just kind of fall from the vine. If you've got to really tug at that thing, it's not ready. Just give it a couple more days. And what you'll notice is if you're harvesting them too early, they're quite sour. Whereas if you let them ripen beautifully, they'll be so sweet. They're like lollies. They're way better than anything I've ever purchased in my life. Like I will say there's a few crops in particular that I think growing them yourself, not only do you get the economic benefits and all the other benefits we've discussed, but they actually just taste so much better. And I will say almost none make it to the kitchen because I just stand in the garden.
There's gardening snacks for
I just
you.
eat them all the whole time. Like who can ever get enough raspberries? So that's as simple as it is to grow them. Then come winter, you'll prune them. And I know we spoke a bit about pruning in the intro to winter. A lot of things, I'm not going to try and explain how to prune them on this podcast. I think you should just Google it. But here's my big but. I feel like everyone makes pruning berries very difficult, and I don't think it should be. So I definitely want to do an episode on how to prune your berries. That would happen in the garden in a few more weeks. So we'll leave that a few more weeks, but come back to that. So you will need to prune them in winter. But other than that, that's kind of all the maintenance there is for a raspberry. I'd give it a feed every year. So more compost or more blood and bone or something more rotted animal manure, something to feed it because they are heavy feeders. But other than that, you've done the hard work getting them in the ground.
Amazing. It's so simple, and you've 100% sold me on this because, I mean, as we've discussed, raspberries are delicious, and why not grow them yourself?
Exactly, and especially you in Melbourne, Tess, there's absolutely no reason why they would not go great in your garden.
So the big question, is the juice worth the squeeze? This is where we look at the effort-reward ratio of today's topic. The categories are superstar, high effort, high reward. Completing this will make you feel like an absolute rock star. Best on ground, low effort, high reward. Quick wins and fill-ins, low effort, low reward. And finally, the wooden spoon, high effort, but not much reward.
So Tess, have I sold you on the raspberries? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
100% yes, easily they're high reward. It does seem like a little bit of effort at starting off for getting them in early. Oh, maybe they're not. Now that I think about it more, I'm like, what's the hard effort part of it? So probably best on ground.
I'm going to say best on ground too, because if you think about planting a fruit tree, which is something else you'll be doing at the moment, you're going to buy a bare-rooted fruit tree that's massive. Well, not massive, but like, you know, a decent size. You've got to get that in the car. You've got to get that home. You've got to try and get that in a big hole. The raspberry canes are going to be tiny when you buy them.
The size of a beer bottle.
Exactly. And, you know, they're going to then take off, and I can guarantee they will give you fruit in a year or two. Whereas your apple tree may take ages to give you fruit. So I think it's a pretty safe win for a beginner gardener, and I think that puts it on best on ground for me. And I really don't do a lot with my raspberries once they're in the ground, and reliably year after year for up to 7 months, because I do have a massive variety of varieties, I do get raspberries. And you know, the other thing, like I found with my peaches, for example, like some snap frost will happen when my buds are flowering and I won't get any peaches that year and it's all a disaster. I found the raspberries just to be really reliable. Like,
gosh, that's so good. You think of them as so, I mean, maybe it's the price that is on them when you're purchasing them from the market or the supermarket or wherever, but you think of them as such a delicate little fruit, but it seems like they're quite durable and quite reliable.
They are, and they are very weedy to grow, which also makes them good. I will say here that I have neglected to tell you one part that may make it seem less appealing, is that you love raspberries, the birds love raspberries.
Right.
So the only negative to them is you're going to be fighting the birds to get the raspberries yourself. Now, for me, this isn't an issue because I grow my raspberries under cover, like under a netting system.
So they would need to be netted.
Well, frankly, I don't know because I've never grown them not netted. Some people would say 100%, and then other people are like, no, I find they're okay. So I would say proceed on the basis that you don't need to net them. But then if you see your fruit is disappearing before it gets ripe,
assume it's the birds.
Assume it's the birds, and you might want to get a net or some other kind of decoy to keep the birds away. So I would say, for me, given I've got the setup to grow them under netting, because the reason for me they're under netting is because they're in my chicken coop. So the chickens are safe and the raspberries are safe. So for me, absolutely best on ground. And if the birds aren't going to attack yours, best on ground. But if the birds come out, that may make it a little bit more effort, ticking it over into superstar.
Rooting for You is hosted by Alyce and Tess, artwork by Lauren Janine. You can find us on Instagram @rootingforyoupod or email rootingforyou@alycealexandra.com. And remember, we are rooting for you.